Today I am going to recap how to solve a quadratic equation by taking the square root. So we'll be taking a look at the square root property, and then in the next video I'm going to show you how to solve a quadratic equation by completing the square. Up until this point, we know how to solve a quadratic equation by graphing and by factoring it, and by the end of today's videos you will know how to solve it 2 additional ways. So let's get started with the first one. The first one, we want to solve this using the square root property. So my first problem is x squared minus 12x plus 36 equals 35. Now, if you remember, this is quadratic. A is 1, B is negative 12, C is 36. So this number here needs to be a perfect square number. It doesn't matter what this is, or what this is, but this one has to be a perfect square number. Reminder, perfect square numbers are like 4, 16, 64, 100. When you take the square root of them, it gives you a singular whole number back. So 3 times 3 is 9. 4 times 4 is 16. 5 times 5 is 25, etc., and so on. So if I take the square root, it works out evenly. So that's a perfect square number. So if this is a perfect square number, then we are able to solve it by just taking the square root. So the first thing we want to do is we actually want to factor this. So I want to factor this. So we'll set up our parentheses. And we're going to leave the 25 as 25. So we need to think of 2 numbers that multiply to give me positive 36, add to give me negative 12. So since this is a perfect square number, we know 6 times 6 is 36. So those are going to be the numbers that go on the inside. Negative 6 times negative 6 is positive 36. Negative 6 plus negative 6 is negative 12, so we're in business. And it will always be the case that it'll factor into the same thing if this number is a perfect square number. Now I can condense this. So x minus 6 squared is equal to 25. All I did was made it smaller. So 5 times 5 is 5 squared. 7 times 7 is 7 squared. X minus 6 times x minus 6 is x minus 6 squared. So I just made it smaller. We're squaring, so let's take the square root. So this gives me x minus 6. I got to do plus or minus when I'm taking square roots. So it'll be plus 5 and minus 5. So plus and negative 5, plus and minus 5. Last thing, I need to add 6 to both sides. And should do in pencil, but we're going to add 6 to both sides. So x minus 6, I keep doing it, sorry, x equals 6 plus or minus 5. So minus my little scribbles here. It was x minus 6. We added 6 to both sides so that I can get x by itself. So x is equal to 6 plus or minus 5. Now, don't leave it like this. I can break this up. So don't leave it at this. So I can do 6 plus 5 and 6 minus 5. 6 plus 5 is going to give me 11. And 6 minus 5 is going to give me 1. So these are my 2 answers. And I know I have 2 answers because this is a quadratic and my highest exponent is 2. In the next unit, we'll be taking a look at all kind of different polynomials, and whatever your exponent is will tell you how many answers that you have. So if this is 4, you'd have 4 answers. If it was 8, you'd have 8 answers. But we're just down at 2 right now, so we're going to have 2 answers. All right, let us take a look at another one. Let's take a look at number 2. Same thing, we want to check this number here to see if this number here is a perfect square number. The square root of 25 is 5, so yes, it's a perfect square number. So 5 times 5 gives me 25. So I can factor this. Since it factors into the same number, makes life a lot easier when you're factoring. Negative 5 times negative 5 is positive 25. Negative 5 plus negative 5 is negative 10. So we're in business. Let's condense this, make it smaller. Okay. Opposite of squaring is to take the square root. So we're going to square root both sides. So x minus 5 equals plus or minus the square root of 27. Now, I'm not finished. I can do some additional steps here. The previous problem that we did worked out to be a whole number. It worked out to be 5, but this still is underneath the square root, so I need to break this down a little bit more. So when I break this down a little bit more, we're going to have to do a factor tree. So over here off to the side, I'm going to do a factor tree. 27 gives me 9 and 3. 9 gives me 3 and 3. Pairs, meaning 2 of the same number go on the outside, and everything else goes on the inside. So this is a pair that goes on the outside, and this 3 goes on the inside. So now this gives me x minus 5 equals plus or minus 3 square root 3. So what I did, I took this square root and I did a factor tree. Remember, factor trees, you got to break it all the way down to prime numbers. If you have 2 of the same number, they go on the outside. Leftover prime number goes on the inside. So this 3 came from my pair of 3s, and this 3 was left over. Not finished yet. The goal when you solve any equation is to get x by itself. So we're going to add 5 to both sides. So add 5 here, add 5 here. This 5 cannot go with this term. They are not alike. This has a square root. I cannot stick it underneath there. They do not go together. So x, my final answer, x equals 5 plus or minus the square root, plus or minus 3 square roots of 3. Recapping this problem and number 1 as well, make sure this last number is a perfect square number. So make sure this is a perfect square number. 8 times 8, it could be 64. 10 times 10, it could be 100. Make sure this number is a perfect square number. When you factor, it's going to factor into the same thing, and then you condense it. From here, we're just solving the equation. The opposite of squaring something is to take the square root. 27 can be broken down, so I did that work over here doing a factor tree. Then from here, this 5 cannot go with the 3 square roots of 3. They're not like terms, so I just put it in the front. Notice it was negative over here. I added 5 to both sides, so I just stuck it in the front right there. So x equals 5 plus or minus 3 square roots of 3. Now, this is the end of this first video. If you want to go try the first few problems, up there on your assignment for today. And then after that, you can come back to the second video and try the other problems.